boy. Go on, go tell her she will not be appeasing her ugly appetite with my food. Or my son. Or do I have to tell her because you don't have the guts? Huh, boy? You have the guts, boy?
Shut up! Shut up!
I've caused you some trouble.
No, mother. My mother. I was afraid. She isn't quite herself today.
You shouldn't have bothered. I really don't have that much of an appetite.
I'm sorry.
I wish you could apologize for other people.
Good evening. Have you ever had a premonition? A feeling that something dreadful was about to happen?
Marion, you want to cut this off?
I'm thinking of it.
I never carry more than I can afford to lose.
Put it in a safe deposit box at the bank, Marion.
How much will it be with my car?
Somebody chasing you?
Of course not.
Girl works for you for 10 years. You trust her.
You have a vacancy?
Oh, we have 12, in fact.
12 cabins, 12 vacancies.
Oh, man, bringing strange young girls in for supper.
She just goes.
A little mad sometimes.
I stepped into a private trap back there.
I'd like to go and try to pull myself out of it.
Oh, God, Mother!
Yes, miss.
I'm Marion's sister.
Is Marion here?
Let's all talk about Marion, shall we?
She's here, in this town.
Somewhere. She stop here?
Oh, yeah. She might have fooled me.
She didn't fool my mother.
Listen, Marion was up here.
Spent last Saturday night at the Bates Motel.
I think I'll go back to the motel.
He was supposed to come back here and talk to us after he talked to the mother, and he didn't.
Norman Bates' mother has been dead and buried in Green Lawn Cemetery for the past 10 years.
We're gonna search every inch of that place.
Inside and out.
That old woman.
Whoever she is, she told our guests something. Mrs. Bates.
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
I mean, if you're watching this, you already know all about the movie anyway. So in 1960, Alfred Hitchcock's newest film, Psycho, hit theaters. And since then, it's been one of the most talked about, discussed, and analyzed films of all time. The making of the film has been the subject of books and movies. The iconic shower scene might be one of the most memorable and parodied movie moments ever.
It's what's her name's dress? The shower lady.
Spilled my shampoo, you idiot!
Norman Bates has become an enduring character who continues to reverberate in different incarnations and is undoubtedly one of the most famous movie characters ever.
Yes, girl. Mama's little girl.
Plus, the house and motel set is a big tourist stop on the Universal backlot.
Guys, don't panic. I think we'll be okay here in the front car, but car 4...
That is so corny. Ah, Norman Bates is coming after us. Oh, jeez.
Oh, Miss Tate. Happy Halloween.
So why would anyone try to remake this movie?
Hi, I'm Norman Bates for the Norman Bates School of Motel Management.
I'm jumping ahead. So forget all the classic, iconic baggage that comes with Hitchcock's Psycho. Leaving all that aside, it's still a really good movie. Everyone knows the story, but briefly, Marion Crane is having a secret affair with divorcee Sam Loomis. With the relationship at a standstill, Marion impulsively takes $40,000 from her real estate office, in the hopes of it providing the opportunity for a real relationship with Sam. She leaves Phoenix, heading towards California to be with him. Thanks to some bad weather, Marion makes a stop for the night at the Bates Motel. She meets Norman Bates and his mom, has second thoughts about her crime, decides to go back to Phoenix, prepares to take a cleansing shower, but never makes it out of there alive, thanks to a very angry mother. Norman covers up the murder, Marion's sister Lila and Sam grow concerned, along with Arbogast, a private detective, and he follows Marion's trail, leading him to the Bates Motel. Arbogast becomes an unwelcome house guest. Sam and Lila head to the motel themselves to find out what exactly is going on, and they discover quite a nutty living arrangement between Norman and his mom. It's weird how this story has penetrated people's psyche. Even people who have never seen Psycho know who Norman Bates is. They might not know all the details of the story, but they sure know a shower comes into play in the movie. It's a classic film, but leaving aside the impact it had on cinema and how daring it was for its time, it's still a really good movie all by itself. The screenplay by Joseph Stefano hooks you right from the start. Even the most seemingly mundane situations rack up tension thanks to Hitchcock's direction and that music, that brilliant score by Bernard Herrmann. It's such a vital part of Psycho. What can be said about the cast? All really good. Janet Leigh is beautiful in this. Marion Crane would become her most famous performance. I always watch how she reacts to things in this movie. The looks she gives off. Being paranoid or apprehensive. I mean, all that's such a big part of this role.
May I see your license?
Why?
Please.
I imagine Hitchcock was right behind the camera directing her with all that. I always like Martin Balsam. He's one of those character actors who I just enjoy watching in whatever he does. The scene where he meets up with Norman, I get wrapped up in how he begins so casually with him. And then you can see how he gets more and more suspicious with the stammering Norman. And then he starts putting a bit more pressure on him.
And after she left, she didn't come back.
Well, why should she?
It's kind of funny, for a horror film, having such a simple dialogue scene be so gripping. See, it's not just about the shower scene in this movie. It's just these two actors talking. How often does that happen with horror movies today? Then, of course, we got Anthony Perkins' understated performance as Norman Bates. I mean, so much is said about him as Norman. He's just awesome in this. It could be the best performance given in any horror movie. I guess if I had to say the weak links in the cast would be Vera Miles and John Gavin. But that's just because they're not really as interesting characters as the rest of these people. They have their functions and serve their purpose, and they're both fine in the movie, but they're just the least memorable characters. Honestly, when I see Gavin in this, I always find myself thinking, so he would have been James Bond, huh? When you read and learn more about the film and all the symbolism and meanings within it, you know, the birds, mirrors, shadows, duality, the voyeurism, even Janet Leigh's bra, you end up realizing how rich this movie is and appreciating it even more. I never get tired of watching it. Yes, I know all the twists and shocks and reveals by heart, but it's all executed so brilliantly. It's just a great, captivating ride. It's one of those movies where I can watch it from any point and end up staying till the end. I always wondered what it would have been like to witness an audience in 1960 watching Psycho. Today, movies have upped the gore and violence to a point where watching a woman get knifed in a shower, it's no big thing. I mean, that's a routine scene in a horror movie today. But in 1960, it must have shocked the hell out of people.
No one, but no one, will be admitted to the theater after the start of each performance of Psycho.
One thing I never quite understood was all that famous promotion of audiences not being allowed to come in late and trying to keep the shower scene and Janet Leigh's death a surprise for audiences. But then Hitchcock made these trailers and gave interviews talking about how there was going to be a murder in a shower.
In that window on the second floor, the single one in front, that's where the woman was first seen. Now, it was at the top of these stairs that the second murder took place. Of course, the victim, or should I say victims, hadn't any conception as to the type of people they would be confronted with in this house. You should have seen the blood. The murderer, you see, crept in here very slowly. Of course, the shower was on. There was no sound.
It's amusing to see Hitchcock walk around the sets, but I never understood the logic behind this. I know movie trailers back then weren't picked over and watched and rewatched like they are today, but Still, wouldn't seeing this tip some people off to what was going to happen? But way back in 1960, the reaction it must have gotten from most of the audience must have been awesome to see, and just to be a part of. All the gimmicks they used promoting Psycho, it looks like just so much fun. Like you're really going to see something special. And fortunately for the audiences who bought tickets, all that showmanship paid off with a really great movie. A Psycho remake was never going to have the same impact the original had. I mean, there was just no way. It was impossible. Jimmy Stewart once said that films are pieces of time. They come together from all manner of events: budget, time, tools, actors, decisions, limitations, agreements. It's impossible to replicate it all exactly. So this might be the craziest remake that's ever been done. It's an interesting experiment, and they got together some pretty talented people to work on this. Even the original Psycho screenwriter, Stefano. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't curious about it when this movie was first announced. It might have been fun for Gus Van Sant to do this, but in the end, it doesn't stand on its own as a very good movie. And it certainly doesn't come close to replicating anything the original accomplished. One thing that has always aggravated me about this remake is the description of it being a shot-for-shot remake. It's not. Maybe it's like 90-95% shot for shot, and maybe I'm being too much of a stickler for details, but I don't consider it an entirely shot for shot remake. So that alone is completely inaccurate. They didn't even do that right. The first shot completely washes away the idea that this is a shot for shot remake. The original Psycho opens with those series of dissolves over the city moving into that hotel room. Okay, yeah, Hitchcock might have wanted it to be one long, unbroken shot, a fly's eye view of the city traveling into that hotel room, and then tying it into the closing shot of that fly on Norman's hand. But in 1960, Hitchcock found it too difficult to accomplish. He dumped it and made the concession of using these dissolves. Okay, so Van Sant does this unbroken shot, and it is a nice opening shot, but it's not what the original did. So I don't consider this a shot-for-shot remake. I'm a real stickler for that. There's a few deviations that Van Sant does like that. The murder scenes and the meticulous editing that Hitchcock constructed them with, they get a few random inserts of bizarre images. I don't know what they mean or what they're meant to represent. Here we get to see Norman blatantly whacking off and allowing us to see the contents of the obscene book that Lila finds. Had he wanted to, Hitchcock wouldn't have been allowed to show us this stuff in his movie in 1960. But the thing is, we didn't need to see that stuff anyway. Van Sant decides to avoid subtlety and flagrantly shows us Norman is this sexual pervert. What a strange guy he is, huh, folks? Van Sant drops the brief church scene.
Well, what did he say about my sister?
Just what he told your detective. She used a fake name. Saw the register myself. Saw the whole place, as a matter of fact. That boy's alone there.
So there's no indication that the sheriff went out to the motel and is reassured that nothing strange is going on, forcing Lila and Sam to venture out there themselves. You can argue as to why the creative reasons why Van Sant decided to drop it, but with its absence, it further shows this is not a shot-for-shot remake. I just hate that description. It's just a remake. Oh, I gotta mention this one. Check out this update. Lila and Sam decide they're going to the sheriff since they're worried about the missing Arbogast. And Lila says,
Let's go see Al Chambers.
Who's he?
Our deputy sheriff around here.
All right, let me get my coat.
Okay, it's reasonable. Little line. And it's 1960, so, maybe like women walking around without a coat. They don't want to leave their, stuff behind. Maybe it's chilly outside. It's December, It's something she needs. All right. But the line doesn't really stand out much. They had to update this because Julianne Moore is not wearing a jacket. So what do they have her say?
Let's go see Al Chambers.
Who's he?
They're deputy sheriff around here.
Let me get my Walkman.
What? How weird was that decision? Her sister is missing. The detective has vanished. She seems pretty worried. Let's go to the sheriff. Wait a second, hang on. Let me get my Walkman. I mean, it's just so friggin' bizarre. I don't know if this was meant to be a joke or what, but actually that line by Moore dates this remake even worse than the original line. When was the last time you saw someone walking around with a Walkman? The most effective update they've done is changing the amount of money Marion attempts to steal from 40 grand to 400 grand. But really, that's not a brilliant creative accomplishment. I mean, it's a no-brainer, really. On the opposite side, there are some things in here that are redone note for note for no real reason as to why, and it just comes off confusing and awkward. I mean, you know in the original it opens with the text of us being in Phoenix, Arizona, and it's Friday, December 11th, 2:43 p.m. Again, right from the opening of the movie. Now, I had read the only reason the text indicates it's December 11th is because when the second unit was shooting footage of the streets of Phoenix to be used in the background, they accidentally included some Christmas decorations hanging in the streets. So in order to make sense of that, Hitchcock said, well, let's make this take place in early December then. Well, there's no accidental Christmas decorations anywhere here. So I guess they decided to just use that original blunder and Hitchcock's solution to it just because they're trying to do this shot-for-shot remake, and it said December 11th. Granted, that's a little thing, but it's something that starts to demonstrate how a film is a product of all the conditions it was made under, and trying to repeat it, it's just nutty. There's a lot of stuff like that. I always thought it was strange when Arbogast arrives at the motel, and he scoots over to get out of his car through the passenger door. We see him do this twice, actually. I figured, and I'm just guessing here, is that Hitchcock wanted to maintain his shot he had in mind, and keep Norman and Arbogast both in the frame the whole time. So maybe he told Balsam, don't get out of the driver's side door, because if you walk around the car, you'll have to pass in front of Perkins in the shot. Or you'll move out of the frame for an instant. You know, something was going on. Plus those old cars had those giant bench seats in the front, so sliding over wouldn't be that big of a deal for people. Once I was even told back then it was considered safer to exit a car through the passenger door to avoid stepping out into traffic. I have no idea if that's true, but I assume there was some kind of logic behind having Balsam exit through the passenger door of his car. Either because it was the practice of car safety at the time, or to just make the action work with how Hitchcock's camera was set up. The remake has Macy do the same exact thing, but the camera pans away from Norman, goes to Macy, and focuses on him as he clumsily scoots over his front seat. He even accidentally hits the horn. I just don't understand the logic. Other than, oh, in the original, he got out of the car that way, so we'll do it here too. It looks so odd. There's that famous shot of the camera beneath Norman leaning over and chewing. Supposedly Perkins made the contribution of the idea that Norman is eating candy corn, as if he's like a bird pecking at birdseed. This shot is supposed to further reinforce the whole bird connection, making him look like, he's a chicken with his long neck and all. Perkins was a lanky, thin guy. It's an unusual shot, but because of his build and the black and white photography, it kind of works. You see what they were trying to go for. They do the same shot with Vaughn, but it's really weird. Vaughn doesn't have the wiry frame Perkins did. His neck isn't thin and long. It just comes off as a nutty shot doing it just to do it. He's even wearing a turtleneck covering up some of his neck. If they wanted to do something similar by utilizing a unique feature on the selected actor, they should have done something with Vaughn's forehead. Maybe make it look like it's containing a second person in there or something. Come up with something on their own. This is what Van Sant brought to the table in retelling the story?
Almost drove right past.
I mean, at least he remembered to increase the amount of money she steals. Yes, inflation. That brilliant, brilliant idea. I remember reading, I think it was Roger Ebert, who said it might have been interesting to play this as a shot-for-shot remake, then halfway through the story, go in a different direction with it. Like right after the shower scene, have Norman find Marion's hidden money, and then take the story in a different direction. It would be a little surprising for the audience who know this story. That might have been, more interesting than just watching a simple retread. But, they just stuck to the original script all the way.
It was mostly because I'd never heard of it done. And I was aware that a lot of people are adverse to watching black and white movies today.
Right.
So that I got this idea that less and less people were watching, older movies.
Classics.
Whereas,
Kids
to
aren't
have
going
a
to
reason
watch this.
to have a reason to really be remaking a film, is like that was one of the reasons.
Right.
Of people haven't necessarily seen it, even though it's very iconographic.
Right. I never had. I saw it the night before I met you.
I mean, if you want to introduce young, jaded audiences to an old black and white movie, instead of trying to do this almost shot-for-shot remake, then just colorize the old movie. I mean, I hate colorization, but, heck, that must be much cheaper than making a whole new movie, and at least viewers would get a much closer idea of what the original film is. It would just have crappy color support all over it. Actually, for a movie that apparently was made with the idea that adding color to the story would draw modern audiences into it, I always thought it was a pretty ugly-looking movie. The addition of color to these sets, doesn't add a thing to me. And then people are wearing these gaudy, awful-looking clothes. Watching this, it's almost like they got the wardrobe from some kind of ancient Salvation Army clothes bin. Everyone looks terrible. They all look like they're in a different movie, too. Anne Heche, she looks like a complete flake. Viggo Mortensen is like some kind of swap shop cowboy. Julianne Moore is this tough lesbian grunge gal who, I guess, has to listen to her Walkman even while her sister is missing. William H. Macy looks like he's trying to play a 1950s detective. And it's like he didn't get the memo this is supposed to be taking place in 1998. We're updating this, Bill. I like some of Norman's shirts, but they look a little bit too flashy for his character, too. Probably the best dressed character in this is the highway cop. The cast. Yeah, whatever. No one stands out or really makes an impression in their roles. Anne Heche, however they chose her, is no Janet Leigh. She doesn't look like a woman getting on in years who's making a desperate last attempt to have a future with a man. It looks like she's running late for her aromatherapy class. Vince Vaughn avoids the subtlety of Perkins' Norman. You can tell he's off his nut as soon as he shows up. He doesn't gain our sympathy, and he just plays the role creepy throughout.
I meant well.
People always mean well. They cluck their thick tongues, and they shake their heads, and they suggest, oh so very delicately.
Julianne Moore and Viggo Mortensen, they just go through the motions and don't get to offer too much in all this. I like seeing Philip Baker Hall as the sheriff, though. I'll have to give my favorite recast actor to the highway cop again. He looks almost identical to the original guy. That was good casting.
So my question was, would it be the same film? Would it actually be Psycho if you took every single piece and connected it together? Would it in fact be the same film?
And what did you find?
And I found that that it wasn't the same film.
This is not the same movie as the original. Nowhere close. I guess Van Sant learned that after spending all that money on this. At the time, he was riding high from an Oscar nomination for Good Will Hunting, and got the clout to do this. And boy, once this Psycho remake showed up, the demand for him really dropped off.
And the first person I told about it was Danny Elfman, who had done the score of To Die For, and who had become a friend, and we were in the Mercer Hotel in New York, and we were having breakfast, and I said, I want to do Psycho and remake it and not change it. And his reaction was like, the critics will kill you, they will kill you. And he meant it, and I assumed he was right, and I had to make the decision in face of this idea that you would get killed. On an artistic side, there was an idea of what would happen if an entire film was able to be appropriated, because the expense is great enough that it's an opportunity to just try something like that to see, what would happen. Also just stylistically, what would happen? Just would it be anything like the original? And just all those different questions made it a very attractive thing, and so I just went ahead and did it. And got killed.
You should have seen the blood.
I suppose this might be worth watching just to see how bad the idea of trying to remake a movie shot for shot is. As if you didn't know that already. So you'd be watching just to witness this project go off the rails. At the very least, Van Sant's remake is something of a fascinating experiment. I have to hand it to them that this was a unique approach at doing a remake, and it does promote discussion. But in comparison, there's no contest between the two films. Hitchcock's original still stands tall and proud, and probably will forever, no matter how many times they try to remake it.
Please, Mother.
No, I will not hide in the fruit cellar. You think I'm fruity, huh?